Hello, and welcome to the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm your co-host, Coach Redpill. I'm joined here by Dr. Benway. And I just want to say that before we get started with today's show, that we've been doing, about 4 weeks of podcasts. And it's been a lovely experience for both of us, and I hope for you as well. And so we're going to be continuing with this podcast. And I just want to ask you, our listener, that frankly, the only way we can grow in terms of our audience is for word of mouth. So if you could tell other people, if you're enjoying our podcast, tell other people about it. Send them a link because it's so easy and it could really help us a lot. So we'd appreciate it. So anyway, we're going to get started with our first topic, and Dr. Benway, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've all seen in the news as of we're recording today. So this is the 14th of May. I give that just so you know when we're talking about the official transfer of the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem has occurred. I'm kind of interested in this, not even so much because I particularly care what the Israelis or the Palestinians in and of themselves think of it. I'm kind of interested in what we think of it. And what's kind of curious to me is the various sides of it. One thinking that, oh, this is a great thing because it will make Jews happy, or another side saying, oh, this is a terrible thing because the Palestinians will freak out and then violence will occur and get harmed, whatnot. That seems to me to be an odd way of thinking about this. To me, it's always been a matter of political will. There's been a logical reason to pick the embassy going to Jerusalem. We made that decision. And at this point, the best thing for us is to say, we made the decision. We're going to sit through it. We're actually going to do it no matter what anybody says. And the idea that this decision will be somehow secondary to what other people think of it is just utterly baffling to me, that anybody on the right wing would kind of take that attitude.
Wait, I don't quite understand. What do you mean by that?
Well, frankly, if you say, oh, I'm pissed at the move to Jerusalem because, this seems like we're just following what the Jews want us to do. That's not really the interesting question. Or alternatively, this is a bad idea because, Palestinians are going to freak the fuck out and get shot and hurt, and we should not do that decision because we don't want to see Palestinians chimp out and freak out and get hurt. And I just frankly don't care either way. Mm-hmm. I just care that we make a decision and we stick to it.
Well,
and there's a logical reason.
Yeah, but it's a trivial.
The rest of the Israeli government is in Jerusalem. There's an efficient question about it either. We're just playing games to accommodate two people who can't get along with each other, to which I don't frankly care.
Well, I where the embassy happens to be, I could care less on a personal level. Politically, I think that. Okay, yeah, practically sure. If the entire government of Israel is in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv is the former capital and no government offices are there, yeah, it's just as a practical matter, it would be more sensible to be where the action is, as it were. I don't really care about the whole thing. I don't think it is indicative of anything. The Palestinians are going to have a meltdown. The Israelis, both in Israel and in their affiliates in the United States, are going to think that this is a great victory somehow, and it's not. It's just. I think it's trivial in the scheme of things. Like all political symbolism, it means really nothing at the end of the day. I'm indifferent to the topic, to tell you the truth. I don't really think it's important. I don't even think that it's, I certainly don't think it's Trump playing 4D chess of like throwing the Israelis a bone so that he can do other things and not have to kowtow to them. I honestly think that this was a family thing so that Trump could have his son-in-law and daughter go there, like the prince and the princess arriving in Israel and being, kowtowed to by the Israelis. I don't think that it's particularly important. But what I will say, in Chile, there's a huge U.S. embassy. I mean, it's enormous, right? And it's this like red limestone kind of building, or it's sheathed in red limestone. It's very, very large, very conspicuous. Because it's on the side of a rather major thoroughfare in the nicer part of town. And I always have thought to myself that the American embassies, wherever I go, they seem to be imperial outposts. They are heavily guarded. They are built in a way that is bunker-like. even in countries that, the political situation is such that nobody's ever going to run riot over the U.S. embassy. But they're built like bunkers. They are obviously extremely expensive to build. And I don't quite see the point of them. I mean, what exactly are they? I mean, I only view them as imperial outposts. I don't know if you've ever seen a U.S. embassy, outside of the United States, by definition, of course. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone to a U.S. embassy in some foreign country and seen what they are like. They're ridiculous. They're absurd.
Well, I don't. I've never had reason to be in the U.S. embassy outside of the United States, to be perfectly honest. But to me, that it's interesting that you would say, these, symbolism, acts of symbolism ultimately don't mean much. I think that's almost trivializing matters. I think symbolism actually does mean quite a bit, and the fact that they are, meant to be somewhat imposing and impenetrable kind of serves the purpose as of where we are now. Is it certainly imperial on some level? Yeah, probably. But that also is a manifestation of, yeah, we have the power and the strength to build this inefficient building if we so want to. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think the idea, in some sense, imagine like what you're communicating by just saying like, oh, you have like a little, sort of, co-op office, that shares
Yeah.
the floor with, Belize.
Yeah.
That certainly isn't going to, convey the sort of image you want. And, and that's kind of independent as to whether or not this area is a political hot zone or what have you. And to a certain extent, that's how I kind of see the situation and the move to Jerusalem. And it has nothing to do with, like I said, whether the Jews particularly like it or not. I think what's interesting is that, for a long time, a lot of presidents have been playing lip service about, oh, Jerusalem is the real capital, blah, 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 blah. We'll do something about it, but always just effectively decide to play out of both sides of their mouth. I am kind of at least pleased that there's at least some stand taking on this to say, yeah, I'm going to do it. Because, at the end of the day, it's another notch to say, hey, look what these assholes pretend to do but never do, and I did. So
I
that
don't
at
know.
least
I think you're
in a
reading too
minor
much
way.
into it. I think you're reading too much into it.
I think that's just what it is. There's no reading at all.
I don't know. I think it's trivial. I honestly don't care. And at this point, insofar as Israel, I've made up my mind about it, so I don't really pay attention to it much. And my thinking is that Israel is a piece of land that was taken away from Arabs by Europeans. It is essentially a European colony or a European colonial territory that was stripped away from the Arab owners and given to a bunch of European refugees who happen to be Jewish. It is not well, yes, maybe it is the ancestral homeland of the Jews, but in a trivial way, because, Jews or Ashkenazi Jews, the Jews of Europe who moved there, had not lived there in millennia. Okay, so it's absurd. It's as if you were to say, I'm from Chile, but my forefathers are Basque and Andalusian. It's as if I were to say, oh yeah, a piece of Andalusia and the Basque country belongs to me, ancestrally, because 600 years ago my family came from there. It's bullshit. Okay, I think it's ridiculous. But anyway, be that as it may, my thinking of Israel is the Israelis are there. That is, Ashkenazi Jews are there. It is an ethno-state. They are carrying out ethnic cleansing. They don't even like brown-skinned Jews. They deport the suckers, right? Like the Eritrean Jews, I think that is, that they're deporting them and giving them money to go back to Africa or stuff like that. I think it's from they're Eritrean. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or someplace like the Sudanese or some shit like that. I don't care.
I forget the exact term, and it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah, because
but it won't be a true European colony to me unless its name is once again Antioch. It's a Catholic Crusader state.
Okay.
But that's neither here nor there.
But you know what I mean. I mean, I don't care. They are carrying out ethnic cleansing. The Gaza Strip is a humanitarian crisis of massive proportion that the Israelis are carrying out. It is a crime against humanity. There's no other way to call it. Because that's what it is. They are slowly strangling the people, but they are deliberately keeping it just above the level of crisis so that nobody really gets involved. Nobody really does anything about it. I think that the Israelis are, I think that they are, on the one hand, a despicable people. And on the other hand, I think that they are a people of enormous energy and vitality. And so on the one hand, I think that what they're doing is immoral, but on the other hand, in a Darwinian sense, I think that, survival of the fittest, baby. And if the Palestinians can't fight and hold on to what's theirs, whose fault is that? You know,
Well, I mean
the
that
victors
kind
are
of
theirs.
that's a typical, that I mean that's the typical attitude you have to take. I mean, arguably you could make the same argument of like, oh, it's a shame what's happening to the Native Americans at
Yeah,
this
well,
point. It's
fuck
like, yeah,
it.
well,
Too
we're kind of a
late.
couple hundred years out.
Yeah.
And yeah, hey, like, sorry, like we won, you didn't. I shouldn't say we because it technically wasn't American at the time.
Hmm.
But I think that's largely the same. And I have to be brutally honest. I don't like the. I'm not saying you're doing this, at all. I would just say for the other people who I've seen do it, I don't like these, crocodile tears for the Palestinians either. And frankly, other Arabs do that just as much as
Oh
others.
yeah,
And
yeah. They use them
my
for
attitude is
political
like,
reasons. Yeah.
am I really going to be, more excited about a group who's kind of friendly with the idea of having their fellow religionists blow them up in my own backyard? Or am I going to be more sad that the Jews are being aggressive to them? I frankly don't care one way or the other. I don't think either is a preferred option. My attitude is always just let them kind of put a rock into each other's head for all I care at this point. It's the
Yeah.
stronger
Well, yeah.
man's going to win.
Yeah. I mean, like in insofar as there's the issue of morality. Okay, and on a moral level, my thinking is this: morality tends to have greater effect on the personal level as opposed to the macro level. You start, talking about the individual. John Smith murdered Joe Doe. Okay, that's one thing. But then you start saying, this people are pushing out that other people and murdering them, and then it becomes bigger and bigger. And then, to my mind of thinking, morality starts to fall in a way, and it just becomes an issue of survival of the fittest. Now, that's an awful way to think about it, but you can't be you can't be having your heart bleed out over every little tragedy that's going on in the world, because there are tragedies going on everywhere, every day. For instance, the war in Yemen, right? What the Saudis are doing to Yemen, they're causing, a massive humanitarian crisis. Children are dying and all the rest of it. We all know that, but nobody really talks about it. Nobody really cares because the Saudis provide something for us, and we're like, okay, we're not going to rock the boat, okay? And so ultimately, a lot of our moral sense is dictated, it seems to me, by the practical necessity. We need to be friends with the Saudis. So fuck the Yemeni. It's terrible about the poor Yemeni children who are dying of starvation and bombs and what have you. It's awful, 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 awful. But, that sweet Saudi oil. You know what I'm saying? And so
I mean, this is fun. The way I bring this up is because there's a certain degree of realist politique that I would take over the sort of, talking out of both sides of your mouth
right.
negative response to this event. This is like a will and we did it, but it's independent of whether or not we're acting humanitarian or not. Because I'd always keep in mind, anytime you play the humanitarian argument here, you are giving way to the liberal attitude of foreign policy intervention. Keep in mind, a lot of our side is very, shall we say, agnostic over the notion, or shall we say, skeptical of the notion that, Syria and the Assad regime is really, whether they're responsible for humanitarian crisis or not, is really not our problem. And the idea that we would undermine that government for the sake of supporting someone who is openly our enemy is certainly something we don't want to do. I think you should keep that attitude also with regard to this embassy move, ironically enough. Now, granted, I agree it's not a huge political move, but if you're going to say we can't do something because a couple of other Arabs are going to get pissy and start acting violent and get shot, I mean, you're just playing into the game you don't want to play in from day one. Just transmit the coordinates and see why why you don't want to start doing that. And that's partly the reason I wanted to bring this up, because I think people are conceding to the liberal game when they don't even know it.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I have to admit, man. I mean, this is a topic that I find a little bit trivial. I'm interested in the notion of the embassy because also I was thinking about it as we've been talking here about the Chilean embassy and why it strikes me as so just ridiculous. Because the Chilean embassy before used to be in downtown Santiago. And downtown Santiago, like a lot of the Spanish cities, Latin American cities, has narrow streets and tall buildings with like straight facades. Because it was so goddamn hot, right? And so the shade, right? And so anyway, the point being, it was in a street called Huérfanos, and it was a very discreet little office. It occupied most of a building, but not all of it, And one of these like nice, 19th century type facade type buildings, right? And very discreet. You would if you passed it and you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. That kind of thing. And it was very discreet, low key, no big deal. Nobody ever protested there because it was like a narrow street, and so it was sort of like complicated and hard to protest there. And it was like, well, it was part of the reason that it was there because it was just so out of the way. Even though it was downtown, it was within a few blocks of all the major government buildings. The presidential palace and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were within 3-4 blocks of the location. Right now, it's actually far away from those buildings, and it's on this big avenue where it's easy to marshal up a crowd of, I don't know, a few thousand people easily, because it's such a wide avenue. If a few thousand people decided that they were going to go and march and protest there, it would be very simple. And the wall they've built for themselves, for instance, in the new embassy compound, is about, I'd say about 10, 12 feet tall. Okay, it's easily scalable. Okay, it's an easy location to overrun. Okay, whereas the old building, the old location, it was actually hard because it was such a small thing that it was easy to shut down and for people to not be able to get into it. Okay, and so I'm like, what exactly? What's the point? But yeah, creating some kind of imperial presence. I mean, look, you and I are going to be talking about the Vietnam documentary by Ken Burns, right? I'm watching it now. I'm actually on the 8th episode, and it's quite the experience because one of the things I'm realizing is I had not realized. I've always thought that 1964 was the apogee of the American Republic. That at that moment in 1964, there was the civil rights movement, the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and that in official legal sense, it fulfilled the Hegelian dictum of what true freedom actually is, whereby we are all free, equally free, and we all have certain limitations on our freedom in order for us to arrive at this complete freedom, this democratic freedom. Okay, and I always thought that 64 was the apogee of the Republic, but watching this documentary, I had never really thought how the American Republic turned imperial with Vietnam. And that's something we're going to talk about in a separate episode. I don't want to talk about it now, but I guess I want to give people a preview of that, of my thinking on it. Is that, the Vietnam War was really imperial. And America, after Vietnam, has acted in an imperial manner,
I'll save it for that episode, but I'll just disagree. I think you're waiting too long to figure out when we became an empire. We have our many imperial moments throughout the 50s and 40s, and you could even go back to say that the Civil War produced the imperial president, if you really wanted to. So I'll be a little bit skeptical on that, but I know what you're saying in a general tone that shifts afterwards. But I think we've been an empire long before that.
Well, no, there might have been sort of like gestures towards empire. Okay, I mean the Wilsonian kind of interventionism of World War I, for instance, that was imperial. The Spanish-American War, Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus, and all he did during the Civil War, which people really give him a pass on. I don't quite understand it, but it seems as if the government during Vietnam, the government functionaries, all of them implicitly, tacitly, and in their bones acted as an empire for the first time. There's no sense of like, is this the will of the people? Okay, this is what's best for America conceptually. Fuck the people, and that is interesting. But we'll save it for that episode. But anyway, I want to polish off this issue of the embassy. I don't care. I don't care about the American embassy in Israel. I don't care about Israel in general. I don't give a shit. I admire the fact that they have clawed their way to that piece of territory and they're not going to let go of it ever. I admire the fact that they have been able to manipulate great powers to get their way very, very effectively. I think that they're an admirable people in a real politic kind of way, in a pragmatic kind of way. I admire them. I admire their nationalism and stuff like that, but I don't care about them one way or another. And I'm sick and tired of talking about Israel, and I'm sick and tired that we should be paying attention to them. Well, I suppose we pay attention to them as a function of their brilliant ability to manipulate the greatest empire the world has ever seen. And that, of course, is something that nobody talks about. You talk about that, and you know, you're shoved off into the dark recesses of the culture, for crying out loud.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting notion that you expressed was kind of two, in theory, conflicting ideas. That at one end it's a colony and operates as a European colony. At the other end, it's a colony which wags the dog.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept in of itself. But that's a topic perhaps for another conversation that we do have planned in a different context.
Yeah, we're definitely planning on talking about that one. So that's going to be.
But let's get to something less controversial then. If we're anxious about Israel and the Jewish political situation, let's talk about taxes.
Oh,
particularly,
that's always fun. Yeah, taxes, yay!
Specifically, taxes in the context of my home state, Illinois. So broadly speaking, those of you who read Zero Hedge might have gathered this. Illinois, well, independent of Zero Hedge, Illinois is in, shall we say, interesting financial situations. Specifically, like many liberal states, ironically enough, there are an innumerable number of underfunded pensions. It's more than just being broke. It's more than being broke. It's the debts that you are obliged to pay for the civil employees, in which that I'm literally not kidding. You are bound by the Illinois Constitution to pay.
Yeah.
You can't even negotiate your way out of it. The Supreme Court of Illinois decided, no, you can't just cancel these wonderful pensions for the various public sectors, public sector unions, what have you. You have to pay them. So their Chicago Fed, which isn't a state organization, it's a federal organization. It's the Chicago or the Midwest branch of the Federal Reserve System.
Well, it's not even federal if you think about it. It's actually private, but that's for another conversation. And
so you take it to they do their little presentation at some sort of local event, these conferences that you only go to because you're told to go to them, like the various, like, how are we handling finances and for corn growers and all of this other shit. Well, needless to say, the state funding question came up, and the Federal Reserve of Illinois decided, here's a simple, witty idea: all you property owners pay up. And it's little more sophisticated than that, which is
it's basically, if you have a home 1% of the assessed value per year,
which is exactly. I mean, and Illinois already has, I think, the highest property tax rate on average in the nation. But their idea is, like, if you have a $250,000 home, 250 to 500,000, you're paying an extra 2,500 in taxes.
Yep.
If you've got a $500,000 home, 50,000, $1 million plus another 10,000 per year on top of what you're already paying.
Yeah.
So essentially what they're saying is, you've got a lot of equity, homeowners, that we're just going to extract to pay this situation. Want to do something about it? Fuck you. It's not like you can do much of anything about it. I mean, they're like, oh, you can't. What are you gonna do? Sell your home and everything? But the joke is, people are their homes and selling and getting the fuck out of the state. This is one of the states where we have a very big net loss of people every year. And
sorry to interrupt, but Mish Shedlock, Michael Mish Mish Shedlock, Shedlock. Look him up, Google him. He's got a great blog about it, and he's from Illinois, and he talks about the fact that essentially people in Illinois are not homeowners. They are renters, even if they think that they're homeowners, because at the end of the day, the taxes are so high that they can't effectively own their own property. It's easy for them to lose it to the state if they don't pay their taxes. And it's really interesting discussion that you should check out over there. But I'm sorry, you were saying?
No, that's essentially it. I mean, it's ironic to me that I've often made the case that homeowners in theory should have greater say in the political and voting situation of their local constituencies, because they're frankly the whole system is predicated on the funding coming out of their property taxes. And people say, oh, how undemocratic. And like, well, of course it's undemocratic, but it's already undemocratic.
Yeah.
You already
Yeah.
assume that you can extract whatever you want out of my personal holdings, and I'm not really getting anything out of the deal in some regard, or at least you assume that whatever transaction is occurring is facing my approval. But the fact that there are more voters who in theory don't own their property than not,
Yeah.
and yet can still vote. The fact that I think even at a national level, I think non-taxpayers are approximately on the order of 50% of the population.
Well,
Can still
the thing that bothers me about property tax in general is that, do you own furniture? Sure you do. Do you pay taxes on that furniture? No, you don't, because you own it, right? Why is it that you have to pay taxes on something that you own? It seems grossly unfair. It seems fair to me and understandable that you would pay taxes on income, pay taxes on consumption. But why is it that you're paying taxes on the thing that you own? Because you owned it, you paid for it. If there's some sort of county assessment or county tax that or state tax or whatever that you have to pay on purchasing the property, fine. You pay it, and that's that. But you shouldn't be owing taxes on a property over time. It doesn't seem fair. It seems as if you're basically undermining the right to property. It seems to me. I mean, that's my view of it.
Effectively, it is. Sorry, there's lightning occurring in my
Okay, I thought that was a prelude to your answer that was going to just devastate me.
Well, that is the voice of God made himself known.
Mm-hmm.
So you're essentially right. I mean, in the argument people have around it is, well, you get a lot of services out of your local government, and as
well, okay, then pay for those services.
Let me just complete thought.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, you should, you have some pay, out of it. But you could also just turn around and say, well, why don't you just say there's a usury fee? If you're using the roads, for a prolonged time, or want to park on the roads, yeah, there's a tax for that. In fact, there already is a tax for that, whether you're a homeowner or not. Mm-hmm. If you're going to use these various facilities, hey, all the people who are using the facilities, there's a fee every time you use it. You could just as easily do that. Mm-hmm. The idea that it's just efficient to assess the property owners a certain percent over time. Yeah, it is bullshit, but it is predicated on the idea, which is what I've said for a long time now. If you really do believe in the rights of life, liberty, and property or pursuit of happiness, what have you, if the originally was property, you have to admit that under our current situation, you're not really even getting that.
No,
right. You already are in a usury position. The government assumes that it has complete rights and dominion over all lands in the country, and that will determine what you will pay or you will not pay.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why I say eminent domain is just the obvious extension to what's already in existence.
I'm just not in favor of property tax because it seems grossly unfair. Okay, it seems grossly unfair that you own something, and in every other circumstances, I'm not paying, additional taxes on the clothes I wear or the furniture I use. Well, I have to pay fees on my car, but they're basically fees to pay for the roads that I'm using. So that makes sense. But why the land? Why is it that every year it just seems grossly unfair. And it bothers me tremendously because it makes it very difficult for property to be passed down through the generations and for the conservation of wealth in a passive way. You're constantly having to earn the money to pay the state. That seems unfair because what happens with a widow, for instance, who has a fixed income and her little house, and she winds up having to pay a huge property tax and having to sell it and move out for fear of losing the only home she's ever known. Is that fair? Of course not. It seems, I just find it really despicable. I find it despicable, but apart from that issue, the issue that I find really funny about this whole situation is all these unfunded liabilities. Oh man, how the fuck are they going to pay for all these unfunded liabilities? Because it's not just Illinois, it's the whole goddamn country. Somebody has said that the unfunded liabilities, you total them up, and insofar as all the promises made to the current workers and the ones who are retired add up to something like $70 trillion, and there is no fucking way that those liabilities can be met. Yeah, I want to see how that's going to be, how they're going to, unsquare that circle. I mean, it's just absurd.
And the truth of the matter is, it won't be. And there's a variety of reasons why that will be the case. Even if you localize it in Illinois, it's like you're eventually just going to lose
Yeah.
all of the property owners. They'll move out, and then you just have a less and less, or a smaller and smaller base of potential taxpayers of which you can extract.
Yeah.
And everybody who's remaining is those who want to see the extraction come into their pockets.
Yeah.
So eventually that goes down. And theoretically, a number of the other states happen. And I think in reality, and I've always said this to people in Illinois, at this point, I'd frankly just rather see a bankruptcy occur and restructuring than to just prolong this forever
No, 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 no,
situation and
no.
just make it worse.
You're not understanding the political situation here. Do you think that all those retirees are going to passively say, "Oh yeah, the state went bankrupt, so I'm not getting my pension, so boo-hoo, that's horrible, but that's life"? You think that they're going to just sit there with their arms crossed?
I'm not being naive, and I know exactly what they'll do. And my response to that is to meet them with force.
What,
Frankly,
you're going to
because
go
they're
and
already
send the
using
cops
force.
with billy clubs to bash the head of granny and grandma? I want to
Yes,
see that
well,
happen.
frankly, they are using force in their own roundabout way. They're basically saying we'll take from you what we want, and we'll use the government to basically seize your land if you so choose.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
but no,
fuck
no,
them.
no.
I'll punch him in
Realistically,
the. I'll knock him in the
uh,
head if that's what's going to happen.
okay, no, but realistically, what do you think is going to happen in Illinois? Okay, because they're
A
they're,
real
they're broke. They're broke, right? Chicago is the bleeding edge of Illinois. Chicago's broke. Illinois is going there. They have unfunded liabilities that are just mammoth. There's no way, in a practical sense, that they can pay for it. The Fed can float any trial balloon that they so please. It's not going to happen that they're going to assess a 1% property value. And if they do, there is going to be a flight and there is going to be massive bankruptcies because there are so many people who cannot afford that 1% per year tax. So screw that. It's if they implement it, they're not going to get the cash because people are going to just abandon their homes or go bankrupt or whatever. Okay. And if they don't, assess that 1% tax or higher taxes or whatever, they're not going to pay. The bottom line is the same. Those retirees are not going to get their full pension. So how do you think that this is going to play out, realistically?
Well, realistically, there's going to be a default. Effectively, there's going to be some sort of bankruptcy default of one way, shape, or form. And whether people feel politically motivated to march in the streets, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to politically will more money unless you want to print more, and you're still not really going to get the outcome you want.
Well, I think that they're going to have to inflate the whole problem away because it's not just Illinois, it's the whole country. And it's Social Security, too. And I think that they're going to ultimately have to inflate away the problem. I think that is they're going to either have to consciously inflate it away or some problem, some crisis is going to happen that is going to create the inflation for them. But they simply cannot cancel these liabilities and say, tough luck. They can't for political reasons. So it's going to have to be some sort of like the politicians are going to have to say, oh, it's force majeure. It's this inflation. We can't control it. Boo-hoo. Oh, cost of living for you? Fuck you. Cost of living adjustment, rather. Cost of colas for you? Fuck you. It's not going to happen. I think that's the only solution for them. The only solution is for them to let it inflate away and just like toss their hands up in the air and say, oh, who could have thunk it? Who could have known? But no cola for you. That's it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, this has been known that it was going to happen for an extraordinarily long time at this point. For a long time, people have been arguing
Decades.
You can't have a traditional pension. You're going to have to go to something like a 401k, like, frankly, every private employee has to deal with on some level. The unions always said, no, fuck you. We like it better the old way. And it just gets worse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what they should have done is individual retirement accounts. Just call them that. Have it be individual, because that's what Chile did. Back in the 70s, they realized that the demographics were such that eventually there was no way that they would be able to pay for it. And they were in the military dictatorship, which saw the wisdom of that. And so they decided to create private retirement accounts. And what it is basically you are obliged by law to contribute, I think it's 7% of your wages go to your retirement account. And half of it is contributed by you, half by the employer. Ultimately, it's you. It doesn't really matter. And that money is deposited in your retirement account, and you can move that money wherever you want. You just can't take it out until you're 65. You can do early retirement at 60, or if you're severely injured, but it has to be like severe incapacitating. It can't be just like, oh, I have a bad back. It has to be something like obvious. And if that's the case, they like sort of like prorate it into the future and of how much you would have contributed, and from there they assess how much you'd be getting at that point, and they start paying it to you right away. And that funding is from like a pooled insurance scheme that's for all the workers. But since it's less than 1%, it's perfectly fine, no problem. But that's in essence the system that they have, and it works like a charm. Okay, and also provides a lot of working capital for investment capital for a lot of businesses, because these the companies that manage these monies, they're tightly regulated, and they can only invest in essentially blue chip companies. Okay, and because of that, there's a lot of capital to be invested in Chile. It works like a charm. It's a great system, but you have to have the political will to do it. And they were able to do it under a dictatorship, a military dictatorship. And I think that that's the only way to be able to pass such a law, because nobody else is going to want it, and everybody's going to tinker with it until it's completely diluted. So,
and yet I still sense in your voice, despite all of the positive statements to authoritarian rule, I still sense a tincture of giving way to the democratic impulse in your voice. You should learn to give that up, my friend.
No, yeah, I mean, like, I wish that we could have like a democracy where people would like look out for the overall good and recognize that something is a good idea for everybody, and that sure, a few people here and there might not be benefited by it, but we should be keeping an eye on the ball insofar as the overall good. But a democracy, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all. And point of fact, the people who are going to be missing out, they're the ones who are going to be hiring the lobbyists and putting enormous pressure on some law so that it doesn't pass, or if it does pass, that it ameliorates their pain, and therefore sort of like destroys the very essence of the law that's being passed. I think that the current democratic system is shit. Okay, it's great to maintain paralysis, but when it's a proactive democratic government that is looking for positive rights as opposed to negative rights, then democracy is a fucking disaster, because it starts creating all kinds of imbalances that lead to what we're experiencing now.
Well, essentially, yes, you reduced the system to a group of disparate factions looking to gain various segments of the pie. You don't have a shared sense of, we're going to build something, because at the end of the day, we've internalized the Keynesian notion. I think I've said this before, that in the long term we're all dead. That predicates itself very clearly in this case.
Yeah.
And also because, like, in theory, this is, as I said, this problem is long seen and coming. Yeah. And Illinois has actually plenty of options. If all cards were on the table, Illinois, in theory, would have had plenty of options to improve the situation, including adjusting, the business incentive plan to bring more businesses into the community and incur growth that way. But we're not doing that, in part because we're our hands are tied because of this pension thing. The reason I kind of bring that up, because I kind of see somewhat parallel but somewhat different voting schemes that went on also just recently in Seattle, where they decided to, I don't know what the rate they were, to tax major companies like Amazon and Starbucks. But the idea was, we want to fight homelessness. So Amazon and Starbucks, we're gonna take some money from you in order to do that. The irony of that was, like, Amazon was so adamant about, fuck you for doing that. They said, this shit where we're going to build up and expand in Seattle, and we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, of course not. Of course, they'd be insane to. Yeah, that's the thing. These people, they start acting in ways that are just not just merely counterproductive, but self-destructive. They start looking at the goose that, you keep on laying golden eggs, but that's not enough. We want to eat a chicken wing tonight. And what the fuck? I mean, it's just absurd. But they're like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And because this is an interesting thing as well, the Seattle case was brought up a thought in my head, because I think there is a healthy tension in me that I'm trying to negotiate all the time, which is a certain degree to which, the various collective individuals of a polis, whatever size it is, should have a right to say what they want and need, what's best for their community, independent of what the various large corporations are doing. Yet at the same time, there's, in theory, a corporation does have some right to say, hey, we would like not to get fucked. We do have some say. We do contribute quite a bit to the community. What's the limits of where, what you can say? Yet we would like to do some things and not do other things, versus what the collective will of the people is. Because it kind of brings back again to on a smaller scale, the whole point I had about taxpayers versus non-taxpayers, property owners versus non-property owners. Like, if you're in theory in a situation where you're a property owner and you're a taxpayer, we'll extract as much as we can out of you because, hey, you didn't build that on your own. We all did that, so fuck you. We're gonna take it. And go say, no, I should have a little bit more say because I'm literally paying for all of this shit. So I feel like there's that tension in me to see that, but at the same time to say, in theory, well, all the corporations can say, well, we contribute the vast majority, so we should have the ultimate say in going on. There's a healthy tension there that I haven't yet figured out where I stand on, but I do see that there is a tension.
Well, my thinking has been, well, you know that I've been like looking into different political theories. You know that I've been trying to figure out a way of my political program is decentralization. I think that what we should be doing is just decentralizing and breaking down these foci of power, these nodes of power that we see throughout our society, which I think are no longer merely nodes of power, but have become cancerous. And I believe that this cancer is spreading. And I think that the dissident right that we're a part of, that you and I and other people are a part of, we have this golden opportunity to change the conversation. And I've been focusing on the notion of decentralization as a libertarian concept, also looking at the issue of the night watchman state, which is basically the idea that the state should be just like a night watchman, just make sure that nobody steals anything, make sure that the house is protected from outside invaders, and that's it, and not mess with the day-to-day internal policy of the state, of the country. And that has led me to the notion of positive rights and negative rights. Okay, the idea that that you have certain negative rights, that is, rights that nobody else has to do anything in order for you to have. Okay, like for example, the right to life. Okay, you yourself, are alive because everybody is prohibited from killing you. Okay, that would be a negative right. Whereas a positive right is other people have to do something for you to have it. Okay, and that's in a nutshell. I'm being grossly, or I'm oversimplifying. But the point I'm trying
That's fair enough.
yeah, the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm seeing the notion of democracy as being anathema to positive rights, because if it's positive rights that we're talking about, democracy will ultimately lead to the situation where we have now, where we have chaos, where we have different factions fighting for power because they realize that if the little faction is able to apply enough political pressure and just focused enough in the right politicians, they'll be able to get outsized benefits. Outsized benefits that are, thousands, millions of times larger than the input that they made in order to get the outcome that they wanted. And look at companies, for instance. You have these enormous companies that with a few $100,000 worth of lobbyists reap outsized benefits in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so it's because the state has taken on for itself the notion of assigning positive rights as opposed to negative rights, which is the prohibition of other people doing things, which I think is, again, I'm oversimplifying, but for the sake of this conversation, I think that we in the democracies should be stripping away these positive rights because they are creating chaos in our society and bringing the state back to the notion of the night watchman state. The idea that the state just, makes sure protects the defense of the country, makes sure that there is no theft, and that kind of monarchist society. That seems to be the only way to save a democracy, because it seems that the way we're going now, our democracy is becoming imperial, and it will become a dictatorship. That seems inevitable. And furthermore, what has me deeply troubled is that it seems increasingly likely that it will become a socialist dictatorship. Because have you been noticing in a lot of econ blogs? I know, Benway, you read a lot of econ blogs, as I do. Have you noticed the resurgence of socialist thinking, of people saying, well, yeah, socialism didn't work, but it was because of these reasons, and if we only tweak these reasons, it would work this time. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that with the modern monetary theorist guys, they're all talking about that. These fuckers are becoming commies, for crying out loud.
Well, I even so a couple of things to say. One, my favorite version of this, even though it's not an economics blog, was the New York Times editorial. It's like, "Happy 200 birthday, Marx. You were right about
What the
certain things."
fuck?
Yeah, I know that was kind of entertaining.
Uh-huh.
But that's kind of dross at the end of the day. I would say, independent of whether or not everybody's becoming commies, I would say that everybody's becoming very interested in management. If we just manage our way through these various systems, we'll figure it out. And part of that is, to your point, yeah, there is predication on positive rights, which is another. I'll phrase it this way, which is to just treated with the contempt I think it's due, which is to say, who pays and who gets.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, that's what positive rights ultimately will yield down to. Who's going to give me what I want, and who's going to be the recipient
Right.
of these kind of gifts and whatnot. And, when you're in that kind of situation, in particular, when you're exacerbated by a lack of cohesion amongst the, kind of populace, there's no shared vision.
Yeah.
When there's no shared vision, the whole political process becomes who gets, as I said, who gets what and who pays. And that's arguably not really political at a certain point. I mean, it is in the sense that I can take and get you to do what I want and take things from you. But it's not political in the sense that, what you had mentioned before and what I had mentioned, there's politics in some way is a shared vision of the polis, what is best for the group.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make the long-term visions. There's no long-term visioning here. There's no shared sense of what we're going to do as a group of society to build whatever we want, whatever your fundamental shared principles are, wherever they come from. When you don't have that shared group, you, in some sense, politics as such degenerates into just like factional fighting, and no real political decisions of any weight are made. You're just fighting over the scraps. And that's why I think you do see this tendency of people saying, well, we'll figure that out by managing it. We'll be there'll be a class of leadership who could figure it out and deal with it. The funny thing is, I'm more or less repeating an argument you're going to get sort of out of a book by Carl Schmitt called The Crisis of Parliamentary Democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically predicated what I just described. When you don't have a shared political vision, in Schmitt's case, it's usually, there's a unified group of people against an outside enemy. And that's how you create a political existential identity. And that's what actually constructs the state and moves the state.
Right.
When you're missing that, you just have what I just described, in fighting about the scraps that are left on the table. And I think that's probably where this, like I said, this managerial tendency is coming from. They recognize that, we know that everybody thinks they're owed something and other people feel they don't want to pay, so we'll figure out the best decisions. Ironically enough, that's been whether the neoliberals admit it or not, that's been their attitude for a very long time. They pretend that there's a libertarian tendency to them, but it's really just management with a with the human face.
Yeah, it's basically
in a kind of twisted way.
It's basically McNamara, to turn the conversation back to the Vietnam thing. I mean, I'm dying to talk about the Vietnam thing. I'm like 2 episodes away from finishing the series, and I really want to get into it because it's this idiotic notion that everything can be reduced to numbers and it becomes a management problem, and that you don't need to have any kind of political vision. You can just like manage your way out of the problem with just numbers and facts. There's no conception that those facts, the interpretation of them, is ultimately political, and there's no notion that the human spirit, that people's mood, their morale, depends on leadership, on a shared vision of some sort. Look,
that always made me laugh. When I exactly the idea that there's a right formula to figuring out what's the proper social order, and the joke about that is the fucking formula is not given from God, or it's not uncovered in Einstein's theory of relativity. Yeah. It's based on human decisions. All formulas are based on human decisions. All formulas. Even fucking Einstein's formula is in some sense predicated on it on some level.
Yeah, the idea. The idea that it's divorced from human input and human bias and human emotions is stupid, because everything that is about human beings ultimately is irrational. Okay, and it has to be dealt with as such. And there are certain irrational aspects that, yeah, sure, quantifiably they're ridiculous, but they change the outcome. In the Vietnam thing, we're going to talk about it, right? In the Vietnam doc, one character, one of the people interviewed, said something that was so goddamn funny. They took all of the information. This was like in 1968, 1969, right? They took all of the information gathered in Vietnam, like the thousands and thousands of pages of data of every little hooch and every little this and village and hamlet and all the rest of it, and bombs dropped and all the rest of it, and they shoved it all into this one computer, right, with all these millions of punch cards, and they wanted to know, when was the war going to end, right? It's 1968, and they put in all the information, right? And the computer was crunching the numbers for like a whole week, and finally delivered a single card. And the card said, "You won the war in 1965." That's
Right.
it. That's it. In terms of quantifiable data, the war had been won, and yet it was ultimately lost. Okay, because it had nothing to do with fucking data. It had everything to do with motivation and strength of will, something that is unquantifiable. Oh man,
And here's the thing, and you've hinted at it. I'll just put an underline an underline mark on it. I can construct a formula to say whatever I want.
sure.
It's just very easy. All I have to do is adjust the relational factors to my data inputs to get what I want. You can do whatever the hell you so damn well please. And that's the point, because someone's going to do what they damn well please. There is no, the scientific management, which that's been a long time in coming. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with the concept, somewhat related, somewhat different, of Taylorization, which was a concept around the turn of the 20th century, which was you can scientifically manage the movements of the human body and the way that humans interact with each other
Yeah.
on a line to basically construct the perfect systems, be they production, social organization, what have you. Literally, this is the idea of the humans becoming the cog in the system, and that's a good thing because we can structure our way through that. This is a disaster. Everybody from the left and right recognized that Taylorism was a disaster, but we've never really left it. In fact, I feel like every different manifestation I see coming out of scientific progress, we use scare quotes in that, are variations on this. Be they the augmented reality systems I see to help field service agents better fix your goddamn car, or the robots assistance on the production line to the driverless cars, whatever. It's all about Taylorization, and like even the fucking cashiers, when they figure out how long you should stroke in a key code to register a SKU number or something. All of this is managed, and yet it leads to some of the most uncomfortably insane and almost fragile systems that have ever been created.
Yeah.
Systems that are easily
but
manipulated, destroyed, what have you. So we're not getting ourselves any better. We just feel like we're in control.
Yeah, exactly. We feel like you're in control, and it's just illusory. But the thing that I'm deeply troubled, and I want to turn it back to this thing because it's a bugaboo of mine, is this idea that a lot of people on the left and the center left are starting to look more fondly on socialism. Because the memory of the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's going to be like 30 years since they collapsed, right? And here's the problem. You see, I come from Chile. And in Chile, we had an actual socialist government from 1970 to 1973. In 3 years, they managed to fuck up the Chilean economy and Chilean society catastrophically in ways that took decades plural, to straighten out, okay? Now, in just 3 years, they managed to do it. They were just fucking brilliant at it. It's like they had a PhD in fucking a country up, right? And so this is the thing. During the Allende government, the socialist government of Chile, from 1970 to 1973, there came a time when they had so mismanaged the economy that they had to institute ration boards. People, to get basics like rice, like cooking oil, like potatoes, they had to go to a ration board. Okay, now my grandmother, a nice, educated lady, upper middle class, she would go with her maid to the ration board with her ration card to get her allotment of food for that week. And what would happen is that she would arrive, and, well, actually, this only happened the one time. She arrived with her card, with her, and the little stamps for each member of the household, right? And she presented the card to get her food. And the person in charge of the rationing board said, "You're one of the disloyal members who are against the government, so you're not going to get any food." Outright. Okay, it was favoritism based on politics. That's what the Allende government led to. And my grandmother, after that, she never went again because it was pointless, because she knew that every time it was going to be the same story, that she was not politically loyal and therefore she was not going to get food. So she had to just go to the black market. And because, my grandfather was a very clever customer, they had some dollars squirreled away, and which is a hard currency used, and some British pounds also. And they used that, British pounds in the 70s, mind you, and that was a hard currency in Chile, okay? And they used that in order to buy the goods that they needed to survive, for food, okay? That's what socialism brings. And it's not that my grandmother told me that and she was like the one crazy lady. Everybody told me about these stories because everybody had experienced it, because it was horrible, right? That's what socialism brings. But they are like going back to this. Smart people, look, go check out Naked Capitalism, right? Naked Capitalism was always very critical of the banks. And I had sort of like lost sight of the blog for a while. I recently started reading it again. Now, these guys were all MMTers, modern monetary theory, which I think is just a stupid theory. I think that they missed like a whole bunch of issues, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that, see, they were basically Keynesians. But in the last 3 years, they have clearly become socialists. They are advocating socialism, that is state control over the economy. Okay, and they are saying that they just have to manage it, like you say, they just have to manage it properly, and all the problems will be solved. It's just fucking insane. And it seems to me that more and more people on the left, the dissident left, the left that is not a part of the current corrupt, cronyist, neoliberal paradigm, those people on the left are advocating socialism more and more, and it's coming back in vogue. And we on the right, we got to fight this fucker, because these fuckers are dangerous, because we've seen it. I'm ranting. I'm sorry.
Well, I have complicated feelings about this. One, because I've hung around with socialists long enough to know that every 12 months they think socialism is coming back in vogue, and it never does. And trust me, that these are the guys who really obsess about this matter.
Yeah. I don't. I don't. Okay, that's why I'm worried about it. Okay, but anyway, go ahead.
My thing is, this is like, if you want to really talk about comfort with management of the economy, we can do it better. Well, frankly, even the establishment right has long been comfortable with that. To be brutally honest with you, I mean, just look at the Tory government in the United Kingdom to see how what conservatism really gets you.
No, that's.
But the thing is,
right,
but that's also true of the center right in Denmark and the center right in France, and
but that's
all
the
these
neoliberal rightists. I'm not one of those. I despise those fuckers.
Well, but also, even I would say there's a tendency among our group to have some degree of control over the system. Like, look at arguably the tariff situation is a certain degree of management, admittedly a more hands-off approach to management, but management nonetheless.
Well, no,
so we do have this tendency.
Yeah, my thinking is that we should, demonopolize. We should decentralize. That's my thinking. Other than that, let them live and die on their own.
This is the challenge I always face with this problem. But it's a problem because I sympathize with where you're going. The problem is this: I do think there is a tendency in politics, as with movement of particles in water, that the path of least resistance ultimately leads to, more often than not, reality.
Yeah, sure.
In other words, the fact that there's been a mass accumulation of monopolistic control or large and larger companies, it's probably because it was, for whatever reason, the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Meaning that arguably our decentralization is going to be the path of most resistance. And if it's the path of most resistance, and especially if your ultimate goal is to, in some sense, ensure a night watchman state, which tries to keep largely hands off, of the political and social organizations. How do you ensure that we don't just fall back into the path of least resistance? The example I always give, it's not the perfect, was like, we broke up AT&T back in the day, and it's effectively kind of aggregated itself into 2 or 3 other big groups again. Right. What's there are things that need to be done almost in an authoritative fashion, or an authoritarian fashion, to keep, ironically enough, too much accumulation of power. It's a conundrum, a paradox, but I
Well,
think
I
it's
think
a real situation.
yeah, it's the state's responsibility. My thinking is that it's the state's responsibility to make sure that no single entity can compete in any market in a way to challenge the state's authority. There should never be, in other words, if it's too big to fail, then it's too big to exist. And that should be the idea. That if anything, it becomes so big that the entire market for that thing would vanish or be, irretrievably crippled by the collapse of that particular player, then that player has to be broken up. That's my
Do you
thinking.
think so? Will this may seem
Or else, or
ridiculously
else, or
technical.
else, or else. Sorry, or else. If it is such like social media that there can, for it to be truly efficient, there has to be one player. Then that one player has to be essentially socialized and become a public utility, treated as a public utility.
Gotcha. Now here's what's I think that's a fair position. Now here's the interesting challenge, and this is a degree to which, to me, you may seem technical, but I think it's important almost on a grander level from the right wing perspective, which is we're focused not just on the current situation but on posterity. Do you think this is a matter of something that you can just write laws and just assume that those laws are going to be maintained going forward, or is it a matter of will that has to be perpetuated through time? I think it's the latter rather than the
Yeah,
former.
I think
I
so
don't
too.
think any
I think so too.
constitutional structures are going to
No,
preserve
no.
this. Our Constitution hasn't preserved shit.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, look, there's another. How can I put it? My thinking is always going on multiple levels on what I think would be best for our current society is what I've outlined. But on the other hand, I tend to step back and pick up the bigger macro view, and I realize where we're at historically. We're not yet at the apogee of the American empire. I think that that's a few years away, not that many years away. I think that the apogee, the true high point of the American empire, is maybe a decade or two away, and or maybe less, but it doesn't matter because I know what the inflection point is going to be. The downward curve is going to start when we have our next big economic crisis. And I think that actually, scratch that, it's not a decade or two away. I think it's actually just a few years away, because I think that the situation of over-indebtedness of the United States on all levels, on personal level, governmental level, state government, municipality, the trade deficits, also the trade deficits at all levels, are just so catastrophic. We simply owe more to the rest of the world than we have. And the petrodollar system has worked like a charm because it's basically made of what you call it, the petrostates. They've made them into the 51st, 52nd, and 53rd states of the United States. I'm talking Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, which are the biggest oil producers, and they all sell their oil in dollars by decree. And they have basically funded our debt. But there's going to be a point where it's just not possible anymore. And that's when I think that the American empire is going to start to collapse. I think the collapse is actually going to be very fast, because if the Roman Empire took 3, 4, 5 centuries to collapse into the Middle Ages, into the Dark Ages, I think the American empire is going to take a lot longer than that. And also, you can argue that the Roman Empire actually didn't collapse. It was the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire continued hunky-dory. I'm not going to get into that, but the point I'm trying to make is that, see, I think that when you step back, I don't think that the United States is going to be a big deal in 100 years. And also there's something else I've noticed, too, that I've been starting to think about. All these race realists, they talk about race realism, this and that, and they're all against immigration and blah, blah, blah. And then you start looking at the various empires of history, right? The Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, and so forth. And you start to realize that the people who exist in Egypt today are not the same people who built the pyramids. They're different. They are the immigrants. They are the children of the immigrants who came to Egypt in its imperial glory and were its slaves and its vassals, and eventually overran the Egyptian population that had built the pyramids. Ditto with the Romans. The people in Italy today are not the descendants of Romans from antiquity. They are descendants of North African and Greek and Middle Eastern immigrants who flowed to Rome and to Italy, to the Italian peninsula, because it's where the power was. And so the poor people went to where the rich people were. It's always happened. And so my thinking is that, that population movement has always happened. And it's those populations that always overrun the old empire and essentially take it over. And I think that that's going to be happening to Western Europe. We're seeing it in Western Europe, and it's going to happen in the United States too. And so my thinking is that, well, we could try and bitch and moan and try to save the situation, but at the end of the day, it's not going to last because nothing human lasts. And it'll be something else, some other great empire that straddles the globe and that controls just about every human being's destiny. And after that empire, it'll be some other empire. I mean, who knows what it'll be? I'm betting that the next one is going to be China. I mean, it seems pretty clear that, China #1, and the Chinese people themselves, the stuff I've been reading about them, they seem to be very, very self-conscious about the fact that they are the coming wave. And they have certain demographic challenges. Sure, the one-child policy has created a lot of problems for them. Yeah, sure, but it seems at this time that they are the ones who are going to be taking over. And I don't think that there's much to be done about it. We can bitch and moan and complain and try to institute policies and all the rest of it, but I think that perhaps maybe the movement of history is such that it's like the tide. You can fight it all you want, but you're not going to change it. That's pretty fucking black pill. Yeah,
let me put it this way. Even if, for the sake of argument, and I would stress it's the sake of argument, say everything you said about the natural flow of history was true. That attitude, that suicidal attitude, is existentially, morally, and on all levels, frankly, something I would never countenance. I think there's actually morally wrong because you're essentially saying, well, suicide is fine because
no, I'm not saying suicide is fine.
Well, that's effectively what you are kind of saying. It's like, well, we can bitch and moan, but whatever. I mean, there's an existential attitude which I get from, it's basically Heideggerian, which is that your very nature of your existence is predicated in the degree to which you stand up against the inevitability of your own death. So that, if you choose not to resist your own death, you're effectively dead already. There's nothing really of your life that's worth living. If you resist it, even if you're ultimately going to fail, because everybody is ultimately going to fail, there's actually some sort of meaning in that. So my attitude is always, whether or not that's true or not, I would never act as if I'm
not acting as such, but I do keep it in the back of my mind. Okay, I mean, in acting as such now, I want things to change. I want decentralism to become the dominant paradigm. And I'm doing all I can, minor though it may be, in that direction, insofar as proselytizing the idea of decentralism, talking to people on Discord about it, spreading the word of decentralism, that, the night watchman state of trying to get away from this notion that the state should be interfering in the body politic, and towards the notion that the state should be worried about defense and making sure that there's a level playing field and that there's never a too big to fail situation in any industry or aspect of society. But other than that it should be hands off, because it ultimately leads to a more robust, more dynamic society. No EBT cards, no Medicare, Medicaid, none of that shit. Everybody should be on their own. And that will lead to a more robust society. It will encourage communities to coalesce, to aid the elderly and the poor and the disabled. I think that is something that we should aspire to, because we want each other. We want to help each other. We need to help each other. As human beings, it gives us great satisfaction. And just to give it to the state, I think, is a disaster. And I think it never should have been done. I mean, the whole Bismarckian notion of the welfare state is fucking awful. And it's created a lot of the problems we have. A lot of problems like, young black men in poor areas who become gang members, young white men who are, hypnotized by video games and pornography and don't know how to talk to the girls, a lot of the problems that we have, the disintegration of the black family, the disintegration of the white family, the collapse of social mores, all of this, I think it is directly the result of a lot of the most of the Bismarckian welfare state, the Great Society shit, which created not a great society, but a pathetic society. Okay, and we should roll them back. And so in the short term, I'm advocating that. But at the same time, I'm realistic. I mean, you think I'm unrealistic or just suicidal?
It tends to the suicidal at times, I must admit, from my interpretation of it. I don't think that means that's inherently wrong to think about these possibilities. My attitude is always, I may have more of a Zen attitude, which is we'll see. By that I mean there will always be, in the near term and long term and midterm, changes which you cannot foresee, but will fundamentally change the dynamics of what we're dealing with. And there's a certain attitude you'll keep to persist in what your goals are. I always say you keep your goals in mind. But my attitude is always, we'll see. There will be a fundamental change that we didn't predict, and it will dynamically change things, and we'll deal with it,
One
or
thing
we'll
that
fail to deal.
yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that was so, you mentioned something about failure, right? Political failure. And who said that line that all political careers ultimately end in failure? I think it was Enoch Powell, right?
It's attributed to him, but I'm pretty sure he's not the only one who ever said it.
Yeah, but he said it in a very elegant way in some history of his. But anyway, the point I wanted to mention is that that line is absolutely true because, oh man, I can't wait to talk about the Vietnam thing. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to be watching the last two episodes I have today, so you better fucking hurry because I really want to talk about it. But anyway, looking at Johnson, in that thing, and this is the only thing I'm going to talk about the Vietnam thing. Johnson in 1968, when he realized that he would not win re-election, and that it was over for him politically, and that he had been consumed by Vietnam. It's such an incredibly successful politician. I mean, regardless of what you think of him, I think he was a corrupt bastard. But I think that he was a successful politician. He got things done. He got the things that he wanted to have happen. And you read the Robert Caro books about Johnson, and you realize what a brilliant man he was, a political genius. He truly was. And that Master of the Senate, I think, is one of the most remarkable political biographies I've ever read. And I can't wait for the final Caro book to come out. God knows when that'll be. At the rate he's going, it'll probably be 2022.
He'll be dead before it's finished, honestly, is my guess.
Yeah, because he's ancient,
He's
God,
in his 80s at least.
he's closing in on 90, This guy's been
Yeah, he's
working
not going to finish. He's not going to finish.
You don't think
he's-
so?
No, I don't. I think he'll be dead. I mean, it's like William Manchester never finished his biography on Churchill. The whatever his name from the Ender's in the games, not the Ender's Game, but there's another science fiction series that was long. He never finished. I don't think J.R.R. Martin is going to finish. Other people will finish it for him. They never finish these things.
Yeah, he's 82. I'm looking at his thing now. He's born in 1935. He started working on he published the first book in 1982, the first Johnson book. In 82, when he was what? He must have been 47. So he's been working. Yeah, my guess is that he'll finish it by 2022, assuming he's alive by then. 2022 is 4 years away, so yeah, he'll be 87. Let's hope that he does finish it. But the thing about Lyndon Johnson, right? He was a successful politician, and Vietnam killed him. I mean, it really killed him. You could see it in the pictures of him. His face, he was destroyed by it. And that's an interesting thing in democratic politics. Democratic, not with a capital D, with a small d. Politicians ultimately end in failure. That's their final destiny. They fail. They end as failures. They end broken. No matter what level, maybe they're trying to run for, county comptroller or some shit like that. Or maybe they wind up being president of the United States. But they always end up in failure. I can't think of a single politician who walked away a true success. who could you say walked away like a true success?
What? So it depends on how. This is going to sound like a cop out, but what are you defining as success? I mean, you're not defining like if they died in office, right? You're not going to say that's necessarily a failure,
No, no,
right?
no.
Let's see. I'd say Washington was probably a success.
Agreed. Yeah.
Eisenhower probably a
Yeah,
success.
agreed. Definitely.
Um, Depending on your interpretation, and then we risky with this one. Lincoln was a success. He had one goal, and it was achieved. He died to get it, but he achieved it. So there's a few,
You know,
and that's just in the United States. There are other, world empire builders who, to some extent succeeded, but arguably the degree to their success could also be tempered by their posterity. So that's why I can take back what I said about Lincoln. His posterity kind of challenges that. George Washington's posterity, even hundreds of years later, kind of questions that. So
like what?
depending on
What about Washington is questionable?
the republic as such no longer exists. Political entanglements, international political entanglements are, thing of the desire to avoid them is a thing of the past.
Oh, wow.
The avoidance of political parties, that was over before he was over.
Yeah.
All of these things, if you wait long enough, yes, everything doesn't hold because, there's no permanent institution.
Yeah. No, it's my thinking that there are a few politicians that are so grossly overrated, like Lincoln, like Churchill. Churchill, he basically torpedoed the British Empire for his own vanity. That's my thinking. That he did not look out for the best interests of the British Empire, and which was his responsibility as prime minister. He went on this grand crusade against Hitler, and I think that grand crusade led Hitler to commit things that were, barbaric. But I question whether the Nazis would have carried out some of their policies had there not been a war with England and ultimately the United States. It's not obviously clear to me. Because, like, for instance, the Holocaust, right? The Holocaust started in 1942. The whole reason for it was because there was not enough food. That's why the Germans, in their very Germanic way, decided, well, we don't have enough food because we've got this British and American blockade. So we only have food enough to feed X number of people. So who are we going to prioritize? Well, obviously the German army first, then the German people, and everybody else, well, they're going to die. So let's just get rid of them quicker and save us some food. That was basically their goal insofar as the Holocaust is concerned. And if you look at the numbers of the Holocaust, Jews only comprised 42% of all the people they killed. A lot of the others were Polish Catholics, Russian POWs. They slaughtered Russian POWs in a way that was arguably more brutal than anything they did to the Jews.
So those numbers belie the fact that I think you've made an error that a lot of Westerners make, which was to presume that the Western theater was more important than it really was. This war was always going to be decided in the East. It always was going to be a vicious war of attrition, and the Soviets, frankly, were always going to win because there was no way Germany was going to conquer Russia.
They came close.
Could there have been a stalemate? Could have been a stalemate? Yeah, but they would never.
I disagree. I think that they came awfully close, and the only reason that they lost was because they had to guard their western front.
No, they were never going to be able to capture the Russian industry, which had already moved to a more secure
No, it's that
zone.
they weren't interested in the Russian industry. They were interested in the
but the
Ukrainian food.
Russian industry is enough to make sure that the Russians keep fighting.
I don't know. Well, this is something that better minds than ours have been, fighting over and slugging it out for decades. So it's.
But that's the other thing you also have to keep in mind, because the events in the East will always mean that the West will see a reason to jump in, even though they're not really the movers and shakers. There's the fact that there's big movement in the East means that the West, at least in England in particular, and France as well, have an interest in knowing, if Germany in theory is going to take over all of the East and consolidate, then yeah, that's a risk to us, little guys on the coastline.
This conversation has gone way astray. So anyway, we've gone about an hour and 20 minutes, so we're going to call it a podcast. What do you agree? Or is there anything you want to hit before we go?
I think we've covered it. I would just hit a tax man before I go, because that's always a good thing to do.
Yeah. Just sock the nose of the nearest taxman. That's your recommendation for this episode.
Or tar and feather. There are polite ways of going about this.
Well, yeah, but let me ask you. I got to ask you this. You're in Illinois, and you are a homeowner, so you must be. I mean, to round back to that most interesting of topics, the taxes, the property taxes in Chicago or Illinois, rather. I mean, let me ask you: do you think it's realistic that they're going to push this? That this is going to happen?
Yes, because they've always done some version of it. There's never been a loss of desire to raise the rate of taxes at any level. You have to remember there's many layers of the government that can affect the property taxes. Certainly states can do it, local governments can do it. There's a county level and there's a township level of government that even other states don't even have a fucking township level of government, but they all figure out ways to impose their needs and costs onto the taxpayer. So there's always some
I actually,
for it.
dude, I'd actually forgotten you're in fucking Illinois. Okay, because I read the Illinois news as like, oh, that's interesting, but fucking moron me, I didn't connect the fact that you're actually an Illinois resident and you are an Illinois homeowner. How much taxes are you paying right now?
I don't say those numbers.
Can you say in percentage terms?
Whatever the average rate is probably pretty close to what I'm paying.
Okay. Yeah, I'll.
It's the highest in the nation. I think it averages all in. I could be misinterpreting it. It feels like nominally they say it's like a couple percentage points of the value, but I think all in it's much higher than that. But I can't remember.
Okay, like 3%. Is that ballpark?
Maybe, yeah. I gotta go back and look through it. I don't like mentioning those kinds of numbers in a public setting.
Yeah, sure. Sure. No, but because I'd forgotten, yeah, that this is touching you directly. And can I ask you, if this is in politics, and I can cut it out of the podcast, are you thinking to yourself that maybe it would be a smart thing to sell out and get a property in a different state?
That's always been a option on the table, and it becomes a more realistic option over time. The main reasons keeping me here are, I've lived in the areas that I've lived for my entire life. I mean, not
Sure.
exactly the same spot, but the areas for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's
your
that.
home.
There's also employment there, but the option of going to a place like Wisconsin or Indiana or even Michigan or even further, like just saying "fuck it," I'm just going to Texas,
Mm-hmm.
is real. I think about it, and if there's incentive to do so, I might very well do it, particularly given a number of dynamics in the Chicago and Illinois area at large. So we'll see, especially, if the Democratic control of the governorship regains itself, or the Democrats regain control of the governorship, which I think they will,
Mm-hmm.
because our current Republican governor is the Democrat in all but name. He's the one responsible for creating Illinois as a, quote, sanctuary state. So we didn't really get much republicanism, if you will.
Oh man.
So yeah, so it's certainly depressing because, like many people who have a sense of place, this is a sense of home here.
Sure.
But there's a certain degree to which leadership allows things that just make that a destructive relationship to be in. It's like being a battered housewife on some regard. Like, he's going to change. It's not going to. It probably won't change.
So I guess the question is, when are you going to set their bed on fire?
We'll see. It depends. We'll certainly see. There's always, as I said, there's always possibilities. I have dwindling hopes for possibilities, but there certainly is.
Well, that's the advantage. That's the advantage of being like a citizen of the world, as I am, because you wherever you are, that's your home, and if it's not hospitable, you decide to move on, and you don't have a problem. You look at it more rationally. It's not just the familial ties that hold you down, but it's also the habit of living there, and it's the comfort of having lived in one place your entire life. One place, not specifically one place, but one place like a general area all your life. Yeah.
Even that idea of being a citizen of the world strikes me as a hollow sort of lifestyle. Sorry to be kind of
Mm,
cruel,
no, not at
because
all.
it's like there's a sense of being no place. The idea that there would be no home. There's always just transient uh,
Yes.
locales,
Yes.
transient relationships. It goes back to the idea of what I don't like about neoliberalism, which is everything feels transactional.
Yes, I completely understand, and you're right. Okay, when you have that like citizen of the world kind of thing, it's on the one hand seems very glamorous and sophisticated, but on the other hand, the relationships that you wind up having, they are by definition not transactional, but much more superficial, because you don't spend enough time for the relationship to be that much deeper. Because like for instance, the you go to the corner store that you've gone to for 20 years, and the guy knows you. It's a even if it's only just a casual hello, how's it going, and maybe once in a while talking about football or whatever. It's a much stronger relationship than going to the supermarket in some random city that you've been to once, and this is the one time you'll go to that supermarket.
Precisely. And I think that my attitude of having some sense of physical home is more um, conducive to your idea of distributism, if I pick
Hmm.
the right word for it, which is to say, if there's a local conception of how sort of smaller society operates, it's predicated on the fact that you know everybody and you've developed those relationships. Being continuously transient makes that harder to do, to put it
Yeah, yeah,
mildly.
yeah, yeah. I agree, and I don't want to call it distributism because it does come from distributism, but for two reasons I'm interested in calling it decentralism and not distributism. Number one, distributism as a term is so 19th century dusty and so allied to Belloc and G.K. Chesterton, who were religious believers, and therefore it sort of like colors the notion a little bit more. And also, I don't like the fact, by the way, that it's really reactionary to communism, where my thinking is not so much reactionary to communism, but reactionary to neoliberalism, and the excesses and monopolistic tendencies of neoliberalism, which I'm very much against. And I think also that decentralization, the second reason I like it over distributism, is that decentralization, in the name itself, you get an idea of what it's about. And it is already positing the critique of the current neoliberal paradigm that is too centralized, too monopolistic. Decentralism gives you that. Distributism, it doesn't really connect insofar as a critique of what's going on. You see what I'm saying?
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I do think they're tightly related, which is probably why. And I also just forgot what your word you were using before, so I just used the word that first came to
Yeah.
mind that sounded right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, I thought about calling it the Night Watchman, the Night Watchman movement, but Mauritian Struggle thinks that that's gay.
Well, it gives the impression that Night Watch or Night Watchman. It's like I imagine it to be a comic book by Alan Moore, and
Oh
you've got
yeah, it is like
Rorschach show up,
oh, the Watch. What's it
or
called? The
Night Owl.
Watchman.
Yeah, it's the
Watchman.
Watchman.
Yeah.
Watchman is the comic series, and one of the characters is Night Owl.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you have that element to it.
Oh
Of
yeah.
course,
Yeah.
in theory, Batman is the Night Watchman, but oftentimes the Night Watchman isn't necessarily there to get a kick out of beating a man in the face.
Okay.
That may very well be.
Yeah, so we're going to leave it at that because we've gone an hour and a half so far. So it's been a great conversation as always. And to all of you who are listening to our podcast, as I said at the beginning, please be sure to pass along links to this podcast so that we can grow our audience, so that we can entertain other people who might be interested in the same stuff that we're talking about. So this is Coach Redpill saying so long for Coach and Benway. Dr. Benway, why don't you take it away?
Yes, to borrow a line from Suzanne Summers, save a life, share a link.
Yes, exactly right. So long, everybody.
Take care.